Welcome back to On Texas Football. I'm Jeff Howe, joined by CJ Vogel. We're going to talk about some notes that CJ dropped over at ontexasfootball.com, specifically the offense and the ability to put the ball in the end zone. And then leadership is always something we like hearing about in the offseason. We'll get to that in this video. CJ, I'm going to borrow a line from you to start out one of your notes in terms of some of the main things you gathered this week from what's coming out of the 40 acres. Many believe there is far too much talent on the offensive side of the football to have significant scoring droughts in 2026. Now, you pointed out some of the issues, especially in some of the bigger games that the offense had finding the red zone. And I will say the red zone numbers year over year were up. Scoring percentage in the red zone was up, touchdown percentage slightly. But again, you look, 30 red zone touchdowns, Arch was responsible for 24 of those. So, CJ, is this a case where it doesn't really matter what Sark does? The personnel is going to be able to just put the ball in the end zone because you've got better personnel than just about everybody you play? Or how much is still on Sark to really push the right buttons and figure out how to make this stuff work?
Yeah, I think it's twofold, right? And, it's kind of a lame answer for the question because kind of the purpose of the conversation that we're having is there's a lot of talent with this offense. But you go back a year ago, Texas played 13 games, right? In 4 of them, you only scored 1 touchdown. Kentucky, Oklahoma, Ohio State. Look, very frustrating. Georgia's the 4th one there as well. So you sit there and you say 3 of those teams are for sure built around their defense and the talent that's equivalent to what you see on the offensive side of the football. So you should think that's where the coaching side comes in. Whereas on the flip side, against Kentucky, you certainly should have the talent advantage. So it shouldn't necessarily matter if you're getting the most pristine play calls, if you're batting 1,000, if you're Steve Sarkisian. The point is they believe right now, and from conversations I've had throughout the week and throughout the offseason, you look around this room and you look around this locker room on the offensive side of the football, where is the drop-off? You have 3 really talented wide receivers, a duo of running backs, maybe even a trio if you add Derek Cooper into the mix, or James Simon of guys that can make guys miss and get the extra yards. And that offensive line, I'll leave the asterisk here for you, Jeff, but the offensive line should certainly be improved, given Lawrence Seymour's eligibility approval, which we're still awaiting final decision on.
Yeah, let's talk about that for just a second. And again, we don't know the timeline. Texas doesn't really know the timeline. I don't even think Lawrence Seymour himself knows the timeline. Do you feel better about it with the Trinidad Chambliss situation playing out the way it has? I mean, at this point, CJ, it seems like you've really got to have like a net negative argument for getting another year in terms of if you can even come up with something that remotely makes sense. It's hard. It's going to be hard for the NCAA to turn down some of these guys seeking that extra year.
Yeah, and also if you find yourself a favorable judge who likes watching you on Saturdays, I think that plays a bit of a role as well. But point being, I mean, you go back and you look, what is the precedent? And I know a lot of folks are saying it's unprecedented exactly what Trinidad Chambliss went through. But when you lay out the facts of where his career started, how long it's taken to get to where he is at Ole Miss, and why he's now being given an extra year, I think you look at Lawrence Seymour if you're Texas and you say, I feel like we're in good shape.
Yeah.
Right? Because, hey, he wasn't on a roster for 2023, and yet that counted towards his eligibility. I'm not sure exactly how, but given some of the decisions that we've seen and, kind of how spineless the NCAA has proven to be at times, I feel much better knowing that Trinidad's eligible and Lawrence Seymour still has his decision to go.
Yeah, again, you go back to when Texas took him, CJ. I don't think they would have pulled the trigger on that unless they felt like they had at least better than a 50-50 shot to get this done. That's not coming from anybody inside the building. That just, to me, that logically makes sense. Why would you do this unless you felt like you had a chance to get it done?
I agree. And it makes sense because, again, Texas could be scouring the portal right now for a grad transfer, putting all of that that time and practice information into building and constructing who that next left guard would be. Well, instead, with Lawrence Seymour in the fold, that to me tells me where their eggs are currently in terms of which basket is getting the most attention.
Right. So I want to go back to the red zone real quick because, look, if Seymour is eligible, it's an upgrade at left guard. And left guard, we talked about it, especially from a pass pro standpoint, until Cole Hudson got there kind of too late, but he did get there late in the year, really solidified, at least settled that position down. It was really volatile for most of the year. That's where a lot of your pressures came from. If you look at the PFF numbers in terms of where Arch was feeling pressure from the various offensive line spots. So you feel like if he's there, left guard will be upgraded. And you look at the red zone, CJ, and the ability to again, what everybody's goal is, you want to put the ball in the end zone. I feel it's less about, hey, can Sark call the touchdown play, and more of, hey, can you look at the pieces you've got and maximize what they bring to the table? Like, look, I don't like throwing jump balls in the red zone. I hate it. It's a low percentage throw. But when you've got a guy like Cam Coleman, that's not so much of a low percentage throw. Instead of like maybe a 20 to 30% chance it hits, you've got maybe a 50-50 or better shot to get it with his ability to high point the football. So I just think it's less about, hey, how creative can Sark get, and more the challenge of look at the pieces you've got, and especially down in the red zone, can you play to their strength? Like, I think the two best things, CJ, that point to he's starting to shift his attention in that direction, at least get on the right track, developing a legit quarterback run game with Arch, which he hadn't really had to do. He's not a big fan of. He's admitted that, but he's changing it up with Arch because of his unique ability. And honestly, the utilization of Nick Townsend in the A&M game, yes, it was one play, but that's like, hey, we trust this guy to use his athleticism and at least take a handoff. If he gets the corner, we'll take our chances with him beating somebody to the edge for a 3-yard touchdown. It's stuff like that, CJ, that leads me to believe Sark is on the right track in terms of figuring out exactly what this personnel can do once you get down into the red area.
It's not just that for me as well, but I totally agree, because look, the utilization of Arch and some of the new creativity that we've seen, the Nick Townsend play specifically comes to mind. We also saw, kind of a halfback, kind of a fullback look, if you will, at times in short distances last year. But it's where will the new wrinkles come in? Because for a while it was just, hey, it was the six offensive line look. Well, they did away with that after 2023. In 24, you kind of come in with a 2 jumbo defensive line look, kind of a full house, if you will, in the backfield. Now, where does it move? Because you can get really creative in short distance. And instead of having to go power with your biggest bodies on the field, you can go speed, right? You have that luxury knowing that Raleek Brown and Hollywood Smothers are 2 guys that can make you right if you're wrong. And what I mean by that is, typically for running backs, you hear that term all the time with your blocks. Make the guys in front of you right. That means either cutting if they chop it right, or if they log it, you go on the outside. You understand what I'm saying here. But the point is, for Sark, even if he doesn't have the perfect play call, the play gets executed because of the talent. And I think that's what we saw early on with Roschon and Bijan. Now you have 2 backs that can do very much the same, is get the dirty work when it's not necessarily presented immediately.
We'll see what Derek Cooper's role is, obviously, with Cam Coleman joining, Ryan Wingo and Emmett Mosley. You're deep and you're talented at wide receiver. And CJ, to wrap up that discussion, to me, you mentioned avoid significant scoring droughts. To me, it's and I'm harping on the red zone as much as anybody. It's less about that, more about you're too talented to me to have those games where the offense gets in such a rut that it's like multiple 3-and-outs, or you just have that stretch of like 3, 4, 5 possessions where just nothing's going. Because when you do have the kind of talent you've got on this offense, it increases your margin for error. Like you said, you don't have to have the perfect play called. These guys can be athletes and maximize plays. And hey, that 3rd and 4, you're going to have a much higher percentage chance of getting it because of the +1 threat of Arch and now everything else around him.
That's a great point. On top of that, you should have more time to throw the football if you're Arch Manning. You like what you have at both tackles. Of course, we'll see how that interior looks in comparison. But if this year's interior looks worse than last year, or even on par, Jeff, we're going to have some conversations. Point is, you should be in a better spot to get the ball where it needs to go. And, of course, just more time with one another. You have 2 wide receivers that played a full year with Arch Manning. You have really a full second season under Arch Manning should also be a big reason why you catapult into more consistent scoring drives, more consistent ability to move the football. And altogether, I don't know if there are many quarterbacks in the country that are in that conversation with Arch when it comes to how he performed on the football field, especially for what we saw in the second half of the season.
I don't think this gets talked about enough, but I mentioned like the hypothetical 3rd and 4, but 3rd down offense was not good at all last season. Texas was 73rd nationally, just outside the bottom quarter of the SEC in third down offense. The only offenses in the SEC that were worse on third down than Texas. CJ, let me know what you think about this murderer's row of offenses from last season. Oklahoma, LSU, Florida, and South Carolina were the only SEC offenses worse than Texas on third down last year. The third down number, 39.2% conversion rate. God, no reason for you to be – we talk about penalties needing to improve. There's no reason for you to be anywhere near that bad on third down in 2026.
No, absolutely not. And go back a little bit. That was a quarterback that had hand surgery in the middle of the year, a quarterback that was benched at LSU, a quarterback that was benched at Florida, and a quarterback that probably should have been benched over at South Carolina. And that's kind of the conversation that we're talking about when it comes to third down efficiency. On top of that, penalties must improve. Texas was way too often behind the chains in third and forever. So when we're talking about 3rd and 4 and how aggressive Sark likes to be when it comes to being on the opposite side of the field, the plus territory, if you're in 3rd and 15, you don't have that decision in your hands anymore. It's make or break on third down. You don't have the luxury to go for it on fourth. That's a big point of emphasis that I'm looking to see improve in 2026 as well.
I don't think anything infuriates a coach, deflates a team, or annoys an observer of football more than third and manageable, and then someone can't hold their water, jumps off sides, and man, we just went from third and 4 to 3rd and 9. And unless you're Kelvin Banks, and again, I don't know, I think Kelvin in that 4th and 13 against Arizona State is like, hey, maybe we just give ourselves a little more room to make this work. So I'll give Kelvin a hat tip for the strategic false start on that. CJ, one more thing I do want to hit before we get out of here is the leadership. We've talked about, the last couple of years, you kind of exit guys like Michael Taft and Trey Wisner and guys that were with those 2 playoff teams that were really good leaders for you. Kind of a new emerging leadership core, CJ, but there's 4 names that have been singled out in terms of what they've done in the offseason so far.
Yeah, let me preface it with this. Of course, not everybody present, in that leadership committee is on the field, right? Due to injuries. Arch Manning, Trevor Gooseby still recovering. You got a couple guys that are still dinged up on the sideline. But from what I've heard over the past week, these are some of the guys that are starting to establish themselves as those locker room leaders. Also, I need to mention Ty Anthony Smith as a guy that's certainly in that leadership conversation. But on-field workouts so far this winter, Colin Simmons, Jelani McDonald, Alex January, those 3 on the defensive side of the football really starting to become the vocal mouthpiece of each level of the Texas defense. That's certainly encouraging when Rasheem Biles is a guy that comes in as a captain over at Pitt. And, of course, Ty Anthony Smith, who I mentioned earlier. Offensively, it's center Connor Robertson that I've heard a lot of positives about. And for anybody that got to watch him at Westlake, I don't think that's a surprise one bit. A team with Cade Klubnik, it was often Connor Robertson that people looked at and said, all right, how do we get up for this game? Who gets the energy going? And it was the now 5th-year senior who did exactly that. So now that he is the guy in this room, because it's taken quite a while to get there, Jeff, his vocalness has certainly risen as a result.
It's awesome to see for me, but we're this far away removed from that historic 2022 offensive line signing class inking with Texas. And here we are heading into 2026. That class still lives. It still has a pulse inside this program because Connor Robertson is the last guy standing. But CJ, that was one move that we talked about during the offseason when we're going through portal season. Everybody, myself included, looked at, hey, I wish Texas would have added fill in the blank on the offensive line. But man, getting back a veteran center that's going into his 5th year in your program that's got legitimate starting experience and actually progressed quite a bit as a player the more he played last year, that's a really positive move for this offensive line to get a starting center back for year 2.
It's huge. And I know that we've talked about it almost every week when Jake Majors was going into year 4 and 5 and how important it was for a young quarterback to be able to lean on him and how, having new pieces around him on the offensive line, whether it was a Cole Hudson or a DJ Campbell or even the tackles, right? Cam Williams starting for the first time or a young Kelvin Banks, being able to lean on that centerpiece is massive for a guy like Connor Robertson, who again, 5 years in the program, 2nd year as a starter now, he's going to have that luxury to kind of breathe off some of that knowledge and expertise when it comes to who his right guard is, which we believe will be Brandon Baker, who his left guard will be when it comes to either Dylan Sikorsky or a Lawrence Seymour. So that's massive for me, and I think it's huge for this Texas offensive line unit as well.
No doubt. And, you look at Connor Robertson too, the leadership, it's needed from that position, because over the years I've talked to, Jake Majors has talked about it. I've heard Zach Shackelford talk about it. Even guys like Dominic Espinosa talk about it back in the day. Like, hey, kind of like you talk about the quarterback, when you talk about the offensive line, the center, whether you want to be or not, you're the default leader of that position. You're the quarterback of the offensive line. So, I say this all the time, CJ, quarterback, a center to me is kind of like offensive coordinator. Like if the offense isn't doing anything, the play caller stinks. If the offensive line isn't doing it, the center stinks. You need to change. Your changes need to start there. So it's everybody's favorite position to beat down. But Connor Robertson, like you said, a guy that's waited his turn, but a guy that I think has the makeup to be the kind of leader Texas needs at that default leadership position at center.
Yeah, again, it would be massive if that's what drives the interior to improvement. And right now it sounds as though he's taken on that responsibility to be at least the vocal mouthpiece for Wyatt Will, Jeff.
And CJ, I'll let you, as we finish it up, add to these notes on some NIL deals that guys have inked. I'm sure a lot of people saw Cam Coleman has inked a deal with Crocs for some NIL money. Ty Anthony Smith getting some of that Raising Cane's money. And maybe the most unique one, CJ, I didn't know Lucchese could make boots big enough to potentially fit a guy like Melvin Siani, but shout out to him for getting an NIL deal with Lucchese.
Yeah, welcome to Texas, right? No better way to be introduced to the state and Austin itself than a deal with Lucchese. So good on all three. There's been a number of other guys already this offseason inking deals with car dealerships, local businesses as well. But those three really caught my attention. And again, I think it kind of speaks to how quickly Texas can kind of get you integrated to what it's like being a star football player at the university as well.
As someone who suffers from a wide foot and it's hard for me to find shoes, I want to see what that Lucchese, if Lucchese can make a boot wide enough to fit Melvin Siani, maybe there's hope for me after all. CJ, thank you for the knowledge and expertise. As always, thank you to Matthew behind the scenes for producing it. Want to remind everybody, if you're not a member, over to ontexasfootball.com, make sure you get over to the website and check out everything we've got going on. News, notes, and nuggets dropped all the time, whether it's off season, baseball, softball, basketball, covering everything going on the 40 acres, recruiting. We've got June official visits, which we talked about here on the channel. Got a running list of those, so make sure you get over to ontexasfootball.com and check it out. Make sure that you like this video and that you're subscribed to the On Texas Football YouTube channel. That way, whenever we go live or a new video drops, you're not missing any of our Longhorn coverage all year round. For CJ, for Matthew, for the entire On Texas Football staff, I'm Jeff Howe. Thank you so much for watching and listening, and until next time. Welcome.